Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our live coverage of the latest mission from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. I'm Will Robinson Smith. Will be conducting our commentary for the duration of this coverage. We are broadcasting, as we always do, from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. Hope you're all having a wonderful week so far. Appreciate you stopping by on a Thursday night. Catch the flight of this Falcon 9 rocket as it prepares to leave the pad. Liftoff of the Starlink 6-74 mission, currently targeting 9:52 p.m. Eastern, 01:52 UTC for our friends joining around the world. Less than 58 minutes left on the clock as the clock stands right now. If for whatever reason SpaceX needs more time before it's ready to launch this mission, as long as it hasn't started propellant load on this Falcon 9 rocket, it has a launch window that lasts until 1:28 a.m. Eastern, 05:28 UTC. We've got most of the crew out here with us tonight, preparing to shoot this Falcon 9 rocket once it does leave the pad. Our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, is running the technical operations of the broadcast. Our Adam Bernstein out here with us at the press site, getting ready to both shoot the rocket once it makes its ascent, as well as do some tracking work as well. Michael Caine shooting for us as well this evening. John has the evening off, but if you'd like to follow the fellas on their social channels, you can find them here on X. Adam is at 8burn NYC, Michael Caine at MD Caine Jr. John is at John Pisani Photo. You can find our main channel, Spaceflight Now, simply at Spaceflight Now. We're also on Threads, Blue Sky, and Facebook for those of you who are not on X. We're also joined with tracking assistance tonight by our friends Chuck and Jen Briggs with C&J Images, taking a look at their view of the Falcon 9 right now, as well as Pete Carsons, who will be cruising on in a little bit later on in the broadcast. Taking a look at our wide shot here, you can see the American flag there just off on the right-hand side of your screen. Weather looking pretty good for tonight's launch. A little bit of a light breeze hanging around Florida's Space Coast, but otherwise not too shabby weather from a weather perspective. Meteorologists with the 45th Weather Squadron forecast a greater than 95% chance of favorable conditions for a liftoff tonight, citing no primary concerns or any additional risk criteria that are potential watch items. If for whatever reason SpaceX is unable to launch today, it needs to pivot to a backup launch opportunity tomorrow. Weather looks just as good. As we're getting rolling here on the broadcast, I want to thank the little more than 1,700 of you who are watching with us live tonight. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking the like button underneath this video, share the stream. That'll help the YouTube algorithm do its thing and bring this live launch coverage to more folks as we cruise on through the count. I also want to thank our moderators for helping us out tonight. A big thank you to Jeff Hansen, Rick Donner. Scrolling through to see who else is joining us tonight. Looks like Rick and Jeff are holding down the fort for us this evening. If you do see any of the other moderators cruise on in throughout the course of the broadcast, be sure to give them a big old Spaceflight Now hello. We're also powered by a wonderful channel member community here on YouTube who make these live launch opportunities possible. So thanks to folks like Butterfly, Cumulus Granatus, Maca WSJ, The Rocket Girl, Ryan Snyder, Kevin Schreiber, and many others. Jim Fowley, good evening to you. Sulfur for lunch, hello, hello. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop that is shop That's spaceflightnow.com. Access to member-only videos here on YouTube, access to our members-only Discord server, and of course the ability to watch all of our live launch liftoff moments from here at the Cape in 4K. Speaking of our channel member community and speaking of our moderators, want to thank Jeff Hansen for gifting 5 Spaceflight Now memberships, helping to grow our community here on YouTube. Appreciate that, Jeff. And to our 5 newest gifted members, welcome aboard to all of you. We're glad to have you with us. Make that 10 thanks to generosity of Maca WSJ. So to our 10 newest channel members, welcome aboard. Glad to have all of you with us. If you haven't already, be sure to thank Mac and Jeff in the live chat. We hope you decide to stick around with channel membership. Reading that back again, I'm thinking it's actually Macaw SJ, not Maca WSJ. That makes much more sense given the photo there with your name. Also want to welcome a new channel member, Tor Emil Howden, joining us with membership at the Path Leader level. A welcome into you, Tor. We're glad to have you on board. 52 minutes currently on the clock before this launch of the Falcon 9 rocket. This mission set to be the 30th flight for SpaceX this year that features Starlink satellites on board its workhorse launch vehicle. This mission, with 28 Starlink V2 mini optimized satellites on board, will bring SpaceX just shy of 700 Starlink satellites launched so far in 2025. To date, the company has launched just a hair more than 8,300 Starlink satellites in total. Of course, a good number of those are no longer on orbit. According to the latest tally kept by a friend of the channel, Jonathan McDowell, who keeps a running tally of things that are in orbit, there are currently just a little more than 7,200 Starlink satellites that are remaining in orbit at this point in time as of the 22nd. Before we get too much further in the countdown, I want to go ahead and talk about what we're anticipating with the countdown of this Falcon 9 rocket as we get closer to fueling getting underway. We're just about 12 minutes from the point where things really kick off. So let's go ahead and talk about this countdown timeline and what we are anticipating with a smooth fueling process for this Falcon vehicle. T-minus 38 minutes is when the SpaceX launch director, generally speaking, will give their go for the start of prop load. SpaceX does its readiness poll electronically, so if they're in a good position to do so, they can take that readiness poll a little bit earlier than the 38-minute mark. But once the green light is given, tanking of the vehicle starts at the 35-minute mark. It starts with rocket-grade kerosene, otherwise referred to as RP1, flowing on board the Falcon 9's first and second stages. And at the same time, liquid oxygen begins flowing on board the Falcon 9's first stage. 30 minutes before liftoff, they start loading a cryogenic helium onto the pressure vessels on the Falcon 9's first stage. Same is true on the second stage a few minutes thereafter. And helium is important because it's used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. T-minus 23 minutes, the second stage RP1 tank is full. Then at T-minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds is when the strong back chill down process gets underway. That's SpaceX conditioning the feed lines there at the pad prior to second stage liquid oxygen load. We'll see this visually manifest by the so-called big vent, which starts here at pad 40 at about T-minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds. That venting lasting until 30 minutes before second stage LOX load starts at the 16-minute mark. Rolling right along, T minus 7 minutes is when the engine chill down sequence begins. This involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps, and it helps protect the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. 6 minutes out, the first stage kerosene tank is full. Then at T minus 4.5 minutes, we'll see the strong back begin to pressurize for its retraction. Visually, we'll see the clamp arms just beneath the payload fairings opening up. And then the transporter erector, otherwise referred to as the strong back, reclines a few degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket, and it stays in that position until liftoff. And then at that point, it'll pull back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9 rocket. 3 minutes out, the first stage liquid oxygen tank is full. Same is true on the second stage about a minute afterwards, at which point the Falcon 9 rocket is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. And in the final 60 seconds, as we hear the call that the Falcon 9 is in startup, control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers, and the propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. SpaceX launch director will give their go for launch 45 seconds before liftoff. The engine ignition command is issued at T minus 3 seconds, and if all 9 Merlin engines are healthy and ignite, the command will be given for the hold down clamps to release the Falcon 9 rocket for a T0 liftoff, once again targeting 9:52 p.m. Eastern, 01:52 UTC, or just a hair under 47 minutes from right now. Just about 45 minutes remaining before the planned liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket. It's been a minute since we've seen a Starlink launch from here on the Eastern Range. Last few missions have been customer flights for SpaceX. Looks like we'll be back in Starlink land for the next little while. Of course, we've got another crew mission coming up here in just about a month's time. That is the 4th private astronaut mission to the International Space Station. That is Axiom Mission 4, or AX4, led by Axiom Space. We'll see the most seasoned, now former NASA astronaut, Peggy Whitson, make her return to the International Space Station. This will be her second time as a commander of a private astronaut mission after retiring from her career as a NASA astronaut. Taking a look at Launch Complex 39A, that's where the AX4 crew will take flight. Peggy Whitson had quite a storied NASA career, logging 675 days in space, 10 spacewalks to her name. And in fact, coming up next month, she'll be inducted into the NASA or the U.S. Astronaut Hall of Fame. Speaking of launches on the board, just earlier this evening, as a matter of fact, within the last hour or so, Firefly Aerospace announced that they finally have a range arrangement over on the West Coast. They've got their mission for Lockheed Martin to send up their LM-400 tech demo satellite that's looking for a launch no earlier than Sunday, April 27th, with a liftoff aiming for 6:37 a.m. Pacific, 9:37 a.m. Eastern. However, they do note that they are watching the wind levels as they head on into that launch opportunities. So we'll have to wait and see if they are able to keep that launch date, but they do have a 5-day launch window that has been booked with the range. So after having to stand down for a while, there were some other missions that had priority on the range, but now finally it looks like Lockheed Martin and Firefly Aerospace get their turn up to bat. So fingers crossed that for the sake of that mission, they are able to get that one often to the races, since they have another one that's coming up pretty close around the corner with the launch of the TaxSat satellite, another one from Lockheed Martin. If you recall, Lockheed Martin booked a 25 mission launch deal with Firefly Aerospace for up to 25 flights on their Alpha rocket. And so these two missions are a part of that launch arrangement. Back here in Florida, as we're awaiting the go ahead for the start of fueling, it's coming up here in the next 3 or so minutes, broadly speaking. Fairly calm night this evening. One thing to note about this launch, the Falcon 9 first stage booster that is flying is going to be making a little bit of movement as far as SpaceX's top 5 most frequent flyers. So let's go ahead and take a moment as we're awaiting the start of tanking this particular rocket, talk about the top 5. The positions haven't changed, but we are changing the numbers. And the one shuffling is in the 4th spot right now. That, again, will not change, but B-1069 is going to be making its 23rd flight to space and back. This particular booster has been used for quite a number of Starlink missions so far, having most recently flown back on March 13th. Taking a look at SpaceX's launches on the year so far, the company has notched 46 Falcon 9 flights. Tonight will be number 47, assuming all continues to go well for the next just under 39 minutes. As we await the start of tanking, want to thank channel member John Dunn for gifting 5 Spaceflight Now memberships. Really appreciate that, John. Thanks for the generosity, and welcome to our 5 newest channel members. We're glad to have you with us. If you haven't already, be sure to thank John in the live chat. We hope you decide to stick around with channel membership. I also want to thank Licia for a $5 super chat. Really appreciate that. And thanks to Norman Reitzel for a $10 super chat. Longtime supporter of Spaceflight Now. Glad you're sticking with us. As you see, we're just past the 38-minute mark, assuming that all is moving as expected with SpaceX and its preparations for tanking this Falcon 9 rocket. Fueling should be getting underway here in the next few minutes. Time now roughly T minus 35 minutes and about 30 seconds. With the start of fueling just around the corner, let's go ahead and talk about where this Falcon 9 rocket is going to be flying once it does leave, in fact, leave the pad. Let's talk a little trajectory, shall we? Once the Falcon 9 rocket lifts off from Space Launch Complex 40 or Slick 40, it's going to follow the pattern of all the other Falcon 9s that have launched Starlink missions as part of Group 6. It'll be launching and heading in a southeasterly trajectory. The first stage booster B1069, following stage separation, will target a touchdown on the SpaceX drone ship called a shortfall of gravitas. If successful with this booster landing, that will mark the 105th time that a booster has successfully touched down on that particular drone ship. It would also be the 435th booster landing so far to date. As we mentioned, this will be the 23rd trip to space and back for B1069. SpaceX is working to certify its first stage boosters for up to 40 flights apiece. Same is true with their payload fairings, and following separation of those fairing halves, they will splash down in the waters of the Atlantic Ocean under the support of steerable parachutes. Once in the water, SpaceX will bring them on board a recovery vessel and bring them back through Port Canaveral, turn them around for future flights after being checked out over at their Hangar X site here at Kennedy Space Center. For those of you who are not on X, The CEO of Port Canaveral gave an update on the comings and goings there at the port as part of his monthly CEO report. I was at the commission meeting Wednesday morning. During that, he noted that for since the start of the fiscal year FY25, so running from October 1st of 2024 through March 31st of 2025, of the 41, or excuse me, of the 3 million tons of cargo that came into port, there were 41 recovered boosters and 96 payload fairings. So, been quite a busy fiscal year for SpaceX so far, and going to continue that pattern here, of course, with a planned launch of this Falcon 9 rocket coming up here as it stands now in about 32 and a half minutes. We're watching for signs of fueling on this Falcon 9 rocket since SpaceX is been long past issuing updates on social media when it begins fueling its Falcon 9 rockets for a Starlink. Head and punch in a little bit closer. And it does appear that we are starting to see a bit of a frost ring form on the Falcon 9 first stage booster. Yeah, you much more clearly see it as we're speaking right now. And that sign of fueling means that SpaceX is locking in their current T0 time of 9:52 p.m. Eastern, 01:52 UTC. For those unfamiliar, SpaceX uses a load and go style of fueling for its Falcon 9 rockets. Essentially, what that means is that once SpaceX begins tanking its rocket, it has no ability to hold the count. And so the start of fueling means a commitment to at least making a run at the designated launch time there. Just under 30 minutes to go now on this Falcon flight, sending up 28 Starlink V2 mini satellites into low Earth orbit. Now past the 30-minute mark, that means SpaceX is also loading cryogenic helium onto the pressure vessels on the Falcon 9's first stage. For those of you who may just be joining us now, I'm Will Robinson Smith, reporter with Spaceflight Now. You're watching live coverage of the Starlink 6-74 mission, sending those 28 Starlink satellites into low Earth orbit. They're set to join more than 7,200 other Starlink satellites that are currently offering broadband internet around the world. Taking a look at our live chat here. Certainly appreciate the more than 4,100 of you who are watching with us live tonight. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking that like button, share the stream, allows more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage. As always, greatly appreciated. Also want to share appreciation with Monkey Tree Rob for gifting $20 super chat. Appreciate that, Rob. Thanks for supporting us at that level. And Rob says, great evening for a launch on Lake Fairview in Orlando. Always love these space people here. We're glad to have you here, Rob, and hope you've got a nice little gathering of folks there at Lake Fairview. Given the clarity tonight, there's a decent chance that folks all around Central Florida and perhaps even as far out as the Bay Area, talking Tampa, St. Pete area, may be able to see this Falcon 9 rocket as it makes its ascent. See Valerie Hallgren checking in from Palm Coast, Pitmaster Biggin joining from Jacksonville, Florida. Go ahead and let us know where you're watching from tonight, whether you're here with us in the Central Florida area. See Lou V is checking things out from Tampa, or if you're further on south here in Florida, or if you're in the Caribbean. Always love to see all those vantage points. If you do see the Falcon 9 as it makes its flight, go ahead and tag us on social media. You can find us on X, Threads, Blue Sky, and Facebook simply at Spaceflight Now. Always wonderful to see what y'all come up with from your particular neck of the woods. Just about 25 minutes left on the clock here. Want to welcome in new channel member Charlene, joining us with channel membership at the pad leader level. Welcome aboard to you. We're glad to have you with us. Talking about what's on board this Falcon 9 rocket this fine Thursday evening. As I mentioned, 28 Starlink V2 mini optimized satellites. SpaceX introduced the optimized version of the Starlink satellite last year, but we really have started to notice them bringing that into use within the last couple of months. Previously, the most number of Starlink V2 mini satellites in the older version, those were capped at about 24 per launch from here in Florida and 23 from over on the West Coast. But with the optimized version of Starlink, SpaceX says they can launch up to 29 of the V2 minis in a single batch. Most we've seen so far fly are 28, and those 28 batch missions have come from here on the Eastern Range. As I mentioned, this will be the 30th flight for SpaceX, with Starlink satellites being the primary payload. The older version of the V2 mini satellites clocked in about 1,760 pounds, or about 800 kilograms. The optimized version of Starlink V2 mini are roughly 1,267 pounds, or about 575 kilograms. With their solar panels unfurled, they have a wingspan of about 100 feet or 30 meters. They use argon Hall thrusters for in-orbit maneuvering. They were built in Redmond, Washington, which is near Seattle, and they'll be deployed at about 180 miles or 291 kilometers in altitude at a 43-degree inclination. You're taking a look at a screenshot from just before, or I suppose this wasn't just before a payload deployment. This was just after fairing separation on a recent Starlink mission. So taking a look at the launch configuration of the optimized V2 mini Starlink satellite. Get a slightly different vantage point here with a look at the stack. Talking about some of the differences between the V2 mini satellites and their predecessors. Starlink V2 mini, broadly speaking, is 4 times the capacity of the Starlink 1.5 version satellite. They introduced E-band for backhaul. They feature upgraded phased array antennas. They're about 2.6 times heavier than the version 1.5 Starlink satellites. And the argon Hall thrusters that they use replace the previously used krypton thrusters. Here's some imagery of what the V2 minis look like when they're in their on-orbit configuration. This is a graphic and artist depiction of the Starlinks with their laser link, the mesh illustrated. Of course, part of SpaceX's business model is their direct-to-cell service. So, in partnering with a couple of the telecom companies, we've gotten some additional artist interpretation of the Starlink satellites. This one coming from the Super Bowl commercial between T-Mobile and SpaceX slash Starlink. And then this one from AU in Japan. This is the, again, the direct to cell, the two that you just saw, this version and this version of the Starlink are the direct to cell variant, obviously, since that ties in with the brand partnerships. This is what a typical Starlink V2 mini looks like, the non-direct to cell version. This image captured by Black Sky and HEO. And one more for you. This is what the Hall effect thrusters look like in a testing configuration. Coming up on the start of the so-called big vent here, as SpaceX is preparing to condition the feed lines there at the pad ahead of second stage liquid oxygen load. And as you can see, the big vent underway. And we are just about 20 minutes away from the planned launch of this Falcon 9 rocket. No, T minus 17 minutes and counting. Got just about 30 seconds remaining on this so-called big vent before that wraps up. And SpaceX begins loading liquid oxygen on board the Falcon 9's second stage at the T minus 16-minute mark. As you can see, the big vent has wrapped up. Second stage LOX load is underway. About 12 and a half minutes left before the planned flight of this Falcon 9 rocket. As we're getting ready to see it make its ascent, let's go ahead and talk about the workhorse vehicle for SpaceX. Falcon 9 rocket. This is going to be the 400 64th Falcon 9 rocket launch for SpaceX to date so far. Vehicle stands at 70 meters or 229 feet in height, has diameter of 3.66 meters or 12 feet. Majority of that is made up by the vehicle's booster stage. This is B-1069, having flown 22 times before. Looking for flight number 23 here in about 11 and a half minutes. At the base of the first stage are 9 Merlin engines, which burn a rocket-grade kerosene and liquid oxygen, producing 1.7 million pounds of thrust. Around the engine compartment, you can see the black carbon fiber landing legs that will be used to land the first stage on the drone ship. Tonight they are using a short fall of gravitas. Above the first stage is the inner stage of the rocket. This is a composite structure consisting of an aluminum honeycomb core, which is surrounded by carbon fiber. In that image on the right-hand side of your screen, you can see the deployable hypersonic grid fins. These are titanium winglets that provide stability and steering for the Falcon 9 as it comes back through the atmosphere, tail first like a big old dart heading towards the drone ship. At the top of the inner stage are 3 mechanical latches that attach to the vehicle's second stage. And at first stage main engine cutoff, high pressure helium is used to release those latches, and 4 pneumatic pushers ensure a clean separation. The second stage engine nozzle is housed safely inside the inner stage adapter until stage separation. Speaking of that second stage, the upper stage of the Falcon 9, powered by a single modified Merlin engine called a Merlin vacuum engine or an MVac engine. It's equipped with a large nozzle which is optimized for burns in the vacuum of space, hence the name. It produces more than 220,500 pounds of thrust, and it will be fired twice on today's flight, placing the 28 Starlink V2 mini satellites into their intended orbit. As with the first stage, so goes the second stage, as far as propellant, that is. It also burns RP-1 and LOX. Following the deployment of the Starlink satellites, there will be one final burn of that engine for the deorbit burn, helping to drive the upper stage back into the atmosphere where it will burn up and help to eliminate the risk of creating any unnecessary space debris on this particular flight. Finally, at the top of the Falcon 9 stack are the payload fairings. Those of you watching Launchpad Live earlier today, you may have noticed the pair of fairings that cruised on by Pad 39A in preparation for a future mission, likely right here at Pad 40. Fairings are 13.1 meters or 43 feet tall and 5.2 meters or 17.1 feet in diameter. The fairing halves will be recovered a little bit further downrange from where the first stage booster lands on the drone ship, a short fall of gravitas. They gently splash down to the waters of the Atlantic Ocean under the support of steerable parachutes. Less than 9 minutes to go here before this Falcon 9 rocket is ready to take flight. And coming up in less than 2 minutes, about a minute and a half actually now at this point, is when the engine chill down sequence will get underway. Always a busy time here in the Sunshine State when it comes to space-related activities. Not happening today, but something that occurred very recently was part of the training for the upcoming flight of the Crew 11 mission to the International Space Station. And the crew happened to stop and pose for some photos along the way as they got their tour. This picture snapped in Hangar X, I believe, is where they're standing in front of this Falcon booster. Usually a crew will take a photo with not necessarily the booster that they will fly aboard, but just as part of their tour ahead of their planned mission. This is actually the second time that Commander Zena Cardman is taking a series of photos like this, since, of course, she was the original commander for her own mission, Crew 9, that launched back last September. Long story short, she was pulled from that mission to make room in part for the return of NASA astronauts Butch Wilmore and Sonny Williams, and so now she's serving as the commander of Crew 11. This picture gives you a nice sense of scale, but let's go ahead and punch into another one, give you a view of the crew that's going to be flying on the Crew 11 mission. From left to right, you're looking at Roscosmos cosmonaut Oleg Platonov. Then to his left, our right, there's NASA astronaut Mike Fink, who's serving as the pilot of the Crew 11 mission, formerly the pilot of the Starliner 1 flight. Moving down the line, there's Zena Cardman, aforementioned former commander of Crew 9, current commander of Crew 11. And finally, on the right-hand side of the frame, you're looking at JAXA astronaut Kimiya Yui. Yui was believed to have been training for the Starliner 1 mission, though he was never formally announced as part of the Starliner 1 crew. Starliner 1 is the designation for the first certified crew rotation mission of Boeing's Starliner spacecraft. That announcement, you're hearing some of the periodic loudspeaker announcements that we hear at the press site that's coming over from the vehicle assembly building. One last image I want to share with you, just a perk of being a NASA astronaut getting ready to fly on board SpaceX Crew Dragon coming up later down the road. You get the chance to go to the top level of their crew access tower and take a look at another Falcon rocket before it made its flight. And a nice little preview of what the Crew 11 shirts will look like once those become available. I want to go back and just take a quick peek at what you see Mike Fink sporting. That is the commercial crew shirt in the SpaceX variant, of course. Coming up on 4.5 minutes before the planned liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket.
For strongback retract.
And as you just heard, pressurization is now getting underway for the start of strongback retract. And we are now getting SpaceX mission audio, which is certainly helpful. A little bit of housekeeping. Want to bring in this view from SpaceX at the pad level. Just want to note the difference in the countdown clock. So you can see ours in the upper right-hand corner of the screen is ahead of what you see from SpaceX. Reason for that is our clock is in real time. What's coming in from SpaceX is they're on a slight delay. So as long as we have tracking views from our cameras of the Falcon 9 rocket, we'll be making those callouts in real time. You see the clamp arms just beneath the payload fairings have opened up and should start to see some movement on that strong back here any second.
Strongback is retracting.
You heard the call out, see the motion. Strong back retract underway. The structure will move away about a few degrees from the Falcon 9 rocket and stay in that position until liftoff. And at that point, it'll pull back in a much more rapid fashion, of course, to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. Just about 3 minutes to go before a planned liftoff of this vehicle. I want to quickly thank channel member Michael McRory for a $2 super chat, as we're now just passing the point of first stage LOX load being complete. Michael says, great turnaround time for this pad. And yes, we should be seeing quite a quick clip of missions coming up here over the next several days.
Stage 1 LOX load is complete.
With that confirmation of stage 1 LOX load, we are now waiting a similar call on the vehicle's second stage. Should be coming up right about or shortly after the 2-minute mark. Also want to thank Gregory Lewis for a very generous $50 super chat. Really appreciate that generosity, Gregory. Thank you so much for supporting us at that level. Gregory says, great to see your content online. Thank you. Well, thank you, Gregory, for helping to make that possible. Less than 2 minutes to go on this Falcon 9 rocket.
Stage 2
Coming
launch
up,
load is complete.
good call out there from SpaceX. What you're seeing now is the ground gas closeouts as SpaceX clears the remaining liquid oxygen from the feed lines there.
Gas launch closeout.
T-minus 1 minute and counting.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
Good call there. We're now just awaiting the SpaceX launch director to give their go for launch.
Launch director, go for launch.
And with that confirmation, we are now less than 30 seconds away from the liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket. 20 seconds. 15 seconds. And here we go in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition and liftoff. Liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket on the Starlink 6-74 mission. Falcon 9 has cleared the tower. Just a minute past liftoff now at this point. We're coming up on max Q, the point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle. Falcon 9 throttling down. Traveling faster than the speed of sound. Great work by the tracking team so far. We're coming up on a number of events in fairly rapid succession. You heard the call for MVAC chill. They're thermally conditioning that Merlin vacuum engine ahead of the start of its first burn. But first, we'll see main engine cutoff or MECO, about T plus 2 minutes and 27 seconds into flight. That'll be followed by stage separation, the ignition of that Merlin vacuum engine, and then the payload fairings will deploy just before the 3-minute mark. About 5 seconds to MECO. Here you see MECO, stage separation, and second stage engine start.
Main engine cutoff.
Stage separation confirmed.
Fairing separation.
MVAC ignition.
See those fairings falling away from the Falcon 9 rocket there in real time. We'll see the same on the SpaceX onboard cameras here in a second.
separation confirmed.
And a good view of those Starlink V2 mini satellites now exposed to the vacuum of space for the first time on this mission as we approach 3.5 minutes into flight. Coming up in about 3 minutes will be the start of the first stage entry burn, lasting about 24 seconds in duration. The entry burn will use 3 of the Merlin engines at the base of the Falcon 9 booster to begin to slow that stage down as it makes its way towards the drone ship, a short fall of gravitas. Less than 2 minutes to the start of the entry burn. Falcon booster has passed its point of apogee, reaching about 124 kilometers in altitude. Still have the faint, well, as I was speaking to it, we are still trying to track the burn of the upper stage engine right now. And yeah, we've got it back. There's a view from our friends Chuck and Jen Briggs with C&J Images. Coming up here in just about a minute or less than a minute now will be the start of the entry burn. As you saw with the views of ascent, there are some cumulus clouds hanging around, so we may or may not be able to see the entry burn as it happens from the ground, but we'll, of course, make a run at it, bring you those views if we're able to capture them. That entry burn starting in about 10 seconds. Entry burn should be underway. And there's Adam, got the entry burn first. And Pete's got it as well. Well done,
Stage
team.
1 entry burn startup.
Stage 1 FTS is saved.
There's the conclusion of the entry burn in real time. Good views from the SpaceX onboard cameras.
Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
Stage 2 FTS is saved.
I call the flight termination system on the Falcon 9 second stage has been saved. No longer needed at this stage in flight. Coming up on our next milestone here, the first stage landing burn, which will use just one of the Merlin engines on the Falcon 9 booster to begin to slow that vehicle down. That landing burn lasting about 24 seconds as well today. Looking for a touchdown on the drone ship, a short fall of gravitas just before the 8.5 minute mark. Of course, the timing that we're looking at for that is going to be based off of what you're seeing from SpaceX there in the bottom middle of your
Stage
screen.
1 transonic.
Falcon booster traveling below the speed of sound. Coming up on 8 minutes in real time.
Stage 2 terminal guidance.
Stage 1 landing burn. Stage 1 landing leg deploy. Stage 1 landing confirmed.
And for a 23rd time, B-1069 is down. Looks like safely on the drone ship.
Impact shutdown.
Nominal orbit insertion.
And a good call for nominal orbit insertion as the Merlin vacuum engine shuts down. At this point in flight, with that good orbit call, the upper stage will coast for quite a while now until about T plus 53 minutes and 56 seconds post liftoff. There will be a brief 2-second burn of the upper stage engine. And then the Starlink satellites will be deployed at about T plus 1 hour, 5 minutes, and 5 seconds. With a good liftoff and landing of this booster, that begins SpaceX's foray back into Starlink flights. If you happen to notice on our launch schedule page, we've got Starlink 11-9 currently targeting a liftoff set for tomorrow afternoon. If all goes well with that window, that opens at 1:40 p.m. Pacific, 4:40 p.m. Eastern. As of now, SpaceX has not named the official planned T0 time for that mission just yet, but we'll be tracking for the point at which they do. And of course, we'll have live coverage of that mission beginning about 30 minutes before liftoff. Before we go ahead and turn you loose for the night, we've got a launch replay that we're getting in work for you. So as we're standing by for that, want to thank Bill Marvin for a $10 super chat. Really appreciate that support tonight, Bill. Appreciate you being with us this evening. Going back to the comment from Mr. Gregory Lewis, thanking us for the content that we've got here online. Of course, if you haven't already checked it out, we do have one of our first pieces from the Space Symposium following the uh, news updates that were coming out from the conference that we posted in a YouTube short form. It's looking at the three lunar terrain vehicle competitors that are vying for a NASA contract ahead of a task order mission that would see one of the prototypes further developed and finalized into a mission that would fly ahead of the Artemis 5 mission. That's on the YouTube channel right now. A couple of shorts associated with that as well, looking at the favorite parts of each of the LTVs from the provider representatives that we spoke with. And we've got that replay ready for you. This is from the vantage point of our own tracker, Adam Bernstein. Starting with actually our a fixed camera view set up by our own Adam Bernstein. Quick view of the wide camera. Next, we go to our turn basin view. Really nice sunrise-like glow as the rocket makes its ascent. As we're watching these replays, I also want to thank a few more folks for their support tonight. Our thanks to John Barini for a $20 super chat, who's watching his first launch with their kids while on vacation in Florida, which is awesome. Evelyn, Alex, and Amelia, hope you all had a good time watching the launch tonight. This is a view from our friend Pete Carson's with Max Q Productions, his wide camera. Also want to thank Tim Vuano. Apologies, Tim, if I mispronounced your last name, but certainly appreciate the $4 super chat. You can tell the amount of cloud that was hanging around Florida Space Coast. Of course, not enough to stymie the launch, but did make for some interesting tracking moments. Looking at Pete's tight shot from his camera, his tracking camera. Largely a very clear night tonight with a few cloud exceptions, so some really nice tracking by the team this evening. Not a lot of wind as well, which certainly does help. The change in what the plume looks like is a result of it climbing into the thinner atmosphere. Creates a bit of an expansion, of course. Contraction there quite quickly because that was the point at which vehicle reached MECO, and this is second stage engine start. See a nice little reflection, the glow of the Merlin vacuum engine at the top of the interstage there. A separation was occurring. Taking a look at the mission stats as they currently stand, this was the 23rd flight of Falcon 9 booster 1069 in the SpaceX fleet. Marked the 464th Falcon 9 launch to date, the 47th of 2025. This was the 405th Falcon booster reflight, or the launch of a booster that has flown at least once. This was the 140th SpaceX orbital launch within the last 365 days, the 246th orbital flight for SpaceX from Pad 40, and the 301st overall orbital launch from Pad 40 as well. Here's the bar chart for SpaceX Falcon rockets so far. Again, 47 flights of a Falcon 9 on the year. Moving on to some recovery stats. This was the 105th booster landing successfully on the drone ship called a Shortfall of Gravitas. That marked the 346th SpaceX drone ship landing and the 435th overall SpaceX booster landing. Finally, with some industry stats, this was the 33rd orbital launch from Florida so far this year, the 49th orbital launch from U.S. soil, the 54th from a U.S. rocket company, and this was the 83rd orbital launch from around the world. That includes, of course, this morning's launch of the Shenzhou 20 mission, sending 3 more taikonauts up to China's Tiangong space station. Safely arrived a little bit after liftoff. There's been one orbital failure on the year so far, an uncrewed flight from a German rocket provider, ESAR Aerospace. And here's what the pie chart currently looks like. As promised, we've got one more replay for you to close things out, and we were going to roll credits. This last view from our Adam Bernstein and his tracking camera.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4.
And if you're just popping in, of course, this is our final replay of the night of the Starlink 6-74 mission that lifted off now some 24 minutes ago. This is the camera view from our tracking camera here at the KSC press site. Air view of the Falcon 9 throttling back up after passing through max Q. The Merlin vacuum engine thermally conditioning and coming up towards MECO. And you can see there MECO, followed by stage separation. And we'll cut things off before we get into second stage engine start because the tracking view version gets a little bit tiny in the frame with this particular framing here. So with the strong back in the upright position, we're going to go ahead and close out the broadcast tonight, folks. Want to say a big thank you to our Spaceflight Now moderators who have been helping us out in the live chat. Our thanks to Aussie Space Girl, to Rick Donner, and Jeff Hansen. Appreciate all of you helping us out tonight. Thanks to our friends P. Carstens with Max Q Productions and to Chuck and Jen Briggs for their tracking work. Big thank you to our photographers Michael Kane and Adam Bernstein. Again, you can follow them on X at ABurnNYC and MD Kane Jr. Our thanks to our Spaceflight Now editor Stephen Young for running the technical operations of the broadcast and for getting the live replays up in order. And as we're always looking to make improvements here at Spaceflight Now, you may have noticed a bit of enhanced audio during the course of the broadcast. So we're rolling out some new audio equipment that'll help us capture more dynamic sound, both for the launches as well as the replays that we're able to provide for you here on the channel, both the quick replay turnaround and more robust replay videos that exist here on YouTube in the future. So appreciate all of you that are part of our channel member community who make continued improvements to our production possible. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Remember, be good to yourselves, be good to others, and we will see you next time, folks. And until then, bye-bye.